It sounds almost sacrilegious to call Jesus an exorcist. But that's exactly what the gospel writers say he was. The Bible implies that he drove not one, but 7 demons out of Mary Magdalene.
It is said in the Gospel of Luke that she had 7 demons and that Jesus cleansed her of these unclean spirits.
But there's one important difference between Jesus and other ancient exorcists. Jesus didn't invoke any power but his own to drive out demons.
He's acting on behalf of God, or God is acting through him, which means it's a direct authority. You do not need magical formulas and special leaves and burnings and rituals if you have the finger of God working within yourself.
The Gospels imply that Jesus is charged with the healing power of God.
This was the evidence that God's reign was coming to expression, that people's lives were changed, that there was healing and wholeness in their lives.
By touching the sick, disabled, even the possessed, Jesus brought them back into the fold of society, a healing act in itself. There's no scientific answer to explain the miracles, but the Gospels tell us that curing may have had as much to do with people's faith as it did with Jesus.
Go, let it be done for you according to your faith. Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Go, your faith has made you well.
Today, many physicians agree that faith can have a positive effect on a patient.
If you believe that you've been healed, then your natural immune capacities of your body are strengthened. This is called a placebo effect.
It may be maintained that, of course, none of this actually works. These miracles never worked and didn't really have any power, but people just imagined that they might work. But I would suggest that, of course, they do work. The fact is, if we believe that they work, they will work for us. If we believed in the first century that Jesus was a person of power who could change our lives will be changed.
At this point in his life, Jesus is a powerful figure. People of all walks of life flock eagerly to his side. As Jesus traveled from village to village, one woman was always at his side, Mary Magdalene. The Gospels mention Mary more times than any other disciple, but provide few details about who she actually was. As early as the 6th century, the Church described Mary Magdalene as a prostitute. Since then, she was often portrayed as a woman of loose morals. But this judgment of Mary was probably based on a misreading of a story in the Gospel of Luke, a story most likely about another woman. Luke writes of a meal Jesus shares at the home of a Pharisee. Suddenly, a woman bursts in, crying and carrying a jar.
And a woman in the city, who was a sinner, brought an alabaster jar of ointment.
And of course, what kind of sins do women do? People generally think that she was therefore a prostitute.
This disreputable woman performs a strange ritual. She wipes her tears and oil onto Jesus' feet with her hair.
Touching another man who's not your husband or your father would be generally considered to be inappropriate. And certainly in Jewish society at that time, pouring oil on someone's feet, dumping their hair on top of it and wiping his feet would be considered very bizarre.
But this nameless woman seems to have had a huge impact on the reputation of Mary Magdalene. Her exit comes just one line before Mary is introduced.
The 12 were with him, as well as Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out.
Early church fathers connected Mary with the prostitute who washed Jesus' feet, simply because the stories were next to each other in the Bible. Mary's 7 demons became the 7 deadly sins. Today, however, scholars believe there's no evidence that Mary was a prostitute. It's her name that offers a clue to a different identity. It's likely that Mary is called Mary Magdalene because she hailed from the nearby village of Magdala, just as Jesus is called Jesus of Nazareth.
It would be extremely uncommon to refer to a married woman by her place. The more usual thing is to refer to her by the man that she's attached to, usually a husband, a father, a brother. So this indication of calling her Mary of Magdala is for me the strongest indication that she was not married.
Since Mary was most likely identified by her village, she probably didn't have a husband or children. But the real puzzle is how she, or any woman, managed to follow Jesus in the first place. The Gospel of Luke mentions a number of women among Jesus' entourage.
Mary, called Magdalene, and Joanna, the wife of Herod's steward, and Susanna, who provided for them out of their resources.
It seems very clear to me that there were women that were in the inner circle of Jesus, women that are independent of their families and so on.
The Gospel also implies that these women were wealthy enough to support Jesus and his penniless missionaries.
Mary Magdalene is described as a woman with a certain number of possessions and a woman of substance, as it were.
Perhaps she had an inheritance, but I don't think we should think of enormous wealth. I think we should think of something much more modest.
Her apparent means, her name with no connection to a man, and her freedom to travel around Galilee help build the picture of the real Mary Magdalene.
My assumption is that she's a widow. Usually when you have, in this culture, women moving somewhat independently and with a certain amount of goods, it's usually a widow.
So Mary had the liberty to travel with Jesus as a devoted follower. How devoted is a question fueled by a stunning 20th century discovery. In 1945, Arab farmers digging near Nag Hammadi found an ancient urn filled with Christian texts. These books, later known as the Gnostic Gospels, were banned by the Roman Catholic Church in the 5th century. They contained new evidence about Jesus' relationship with Mary Magdalene.
The companion of the Savior is Mary Magdalene. He loved her more than all the disciples.
The Gospel of Philip claims that Mary Magdalene had a special, even intimate relationship with Jesus. But the words that follow are even more surprising.
And used to kiss her on her.
It is suggested that Jesus loved Mary more than the other disciples. And he used to kiss her often on her, and then, unfortunately, there's a hole in the text.
And of course, it's in that hole that various people have filled in all kinds of imaginable options.
The word mouth fits in there very nicely, and that's usually how it's restored, that Jesus used to kiss Mary Magdalene often on the mouth.
This suggestion sent shockwaves through Christianity.
For a man to kiss a woman who's not his wife or mother or something like that, in traditional Judaism,